A Giants podcast for Giants fans
By Giants fans.
from the offseason through the wins and the losses. It's time to take one Giant step.
Welcome into One Giant Step, a bye-week episode of Joe Schoen gets basically fed to the wolves episode. Shaun Morash here. Bryce Gelman there. Thank you for subscribing, downloading to One Giant Step everywhere podcasts are available. This is kind of a special One Giant Step in many ways because the other podcast I do talking Giants, I haven't commented on the Joe Schoen press conference on. So we're back.
And this is also, I think this is the first time we've done 2 podcasts in a day.
I stared at you in the morning. I'm staring at you at night. It's been a long 24 hours for anybody in the Giant universe, fans, creators, hosts. It doesn't matter. I needed a break before Shane spoke, but they rushed that out there and they got it out there. Shane did speak. So here's how this podcast is going to go, Bryce. You that voice, Bryce Gelman. Joe Schoen met the media for about 20 minutes. He was, full disclosure, 35 minutes late from the original start time, which is only worth noting because of all the Abdul Carter's late for meetings, missing meetings thing. And the old, when we used to make fun of Tom Coughlin for being 5 minutes early, as the years go on, you start to realize, while that might have been a little crazy, this is crazier. Like having the media show up and be 35 minutes late is just pure insanity.
Dude, he was back there sweating bullets. He was getting trained by 5 different PR members. There's 10 people around him trying to figure this out and making sure he doesn't slip up and say something stupid.
No doubt. And we saw the behind the scenes on that Hard Knocks about how the media training goes for a Shane or at that time Dable when they speak. And it's just, but even with that, I thought that it ended up being an interesting press conference. For those that wanted Shane to come across like an idiot, I think you got your wish. For those that wanted Shane to succeed, you might have been able to point to some things. So here's how I want to do this, Bryce. If you want to go back and you are listening to this podcast and you haven't heard Joe Schoen speak, unfortunately, we're not going to play back audio, but that press conference lives on YouTube. Go check it out.
No, it doesn't. They made it private.
They made it private. They took it away after it aired?
Yeah, dude, I was 25 minutes in, 20 minutes in, and,
really?
middle of the press conference. It wasn't over yet. And it automatically went to private. I'm almost positive they took it down.
Oh, I watched the whole thing from WFAN on YouTube today because I was the one in charge of
Let me.
Here it is. It's living here, dude. It's here.
It seemed like they took it down.
Nah, it's here.
That was weird. But literally during the thing, yeah. Did it only go 21 minutes?
Yeah, it was short. And the way it ended was abruptly, and we'll get to that. I listened to every single word that was spoken. So peel back the curtain if you care about like WFAN intricacies. On the Evan and Tiki show, where I play the third host on the show, oftentimes with big press conferences, the big ones, I will be the one that goes out into the newsroom and I'll actually remove myself from the show, which is what I did for almost the entirety of the first hour of the program on Monday, which was a big hour I wanted to be a part of, clearly, but you're waiting on it. So that was why I was annoyed where 145 turned into 225, I think, or 220. So that's just kind of like inside radio stuff. Listen, every word Shane spoke. And then, by 3:00, I rejoined the Evan and Tiki show and brought all the audio forefront. So I combed through it. So here's how I want to do this, Bryce. I have my 5 takeaways. I'm going to give them my anecdotes, my thoughts. I think you should respond to all of those. If there is anything that you heard Joe Schoen say that you piqued your interest, you thought was interesting, we don't have to go 5 for 5.
Yeah, you already sent me what you had, and that's literally everything that I was going to bring up on the podcast. I think it's pretty, black and white. Either you heard the stupid things or you didn't.
All right, so that's fine. So I'm just kind of giving the audience how this is going to go. I'm not going to do the 5, 4, 3. We're not doing Cinco de Five here.
Yeah.
But more or less just kind of, I think these, and 5's a roundabout number. I just think it's the 5 kind of most important talking points for what we do here on a podcast form. Again, if Bryce feels like there's something else that he wants to add to the table after, by all means, Bryce, do it. But let's kind of go through these points. Being late to the podcast, being late to the press conference is not one of those. All right. Here's my first thought, and this is more or less of a singular answer and more of connecting the dots. I really, really have thought about this in the 5 hours that have passed. I feel less certain than ever that Joe Schoen is safe after the season. I do. He ended the press conference with a very abrupt pressed question by Jordan Renan about, hey, what happens if the new coach you're looking to hire wants to bring in his own GM? Valid question. Aaron Glenn just basically did this with the Jets, where he was kind of tasked with doing the reverse of the GM hires the coach brings in a GM. And Joe Schoen had a very odd answer where he said, I'm confident based on the calls we've gotten that the position will be filled. And that was kind of like a snarky way I interpreted it of, if we hire a GM, if we hire a coach that wants to work with me, I'm going to be here, but I'm not guaranteed to be here. Like there's still confidence in him, but he made sure to say, even with the Brian Daboll firing, ownership decision. And I didn't take that as he was trying to skirt it. I don't think that Joe Schoen, I think, was out for himself and saving himself when Brian Daboll was fired, but I don't think he fired Brian Daboll and turned to ownership and said, this is what we have to do. I think he was very adamant about the record speaks for himself. He was right about that. He had no choice but to accept that, because what else can you say? The general manager of the New York Giants is overseeing a terrible situation where currently, and this was a good job by the Giants Nation pod putting together, one game better through 64 games as a GM than Dave Gettleman's tenure was. One game.
5-25.
But even the overall whole regime, like Dave Gettleman at this point was one game worse than Joe Schoen, which is crazy.
I saw that.
Not a lot of Giant football. Bryce, I just walked away from it going, can the Giants bring Joe Schoen back? Yeah, they could do anything if they want to get real lazy with a search. And obviously John Mara's health is going to be a major question, how much that factors into everything. I think that's kind of the giant, elephant in the room, if you will. But I have been operating under the mentality of it's a fait accompli that he's coming back. I walked away from this press conference feeling less certain about that. How did you?
I think based off Joe Schoen's reaction, he seems less certain that he's going to come back. I've never seen someone look so out of place and so uncomfortable in my life. The second he walked out there on that podium and stood there in front of all the media and all the fans, you could get a sense, Shaun, he's not too confident that he's going to be back next year. If he was, he'd be up there confident as all. And here's the thing, because you could play devil's advocate in saying maybe he's just really upset over what happened against the Patriots on prime time, that he knows that the tide is turning even more against him. Like it was like 90-10. Now it's like 97-3 in terms of who wants to fire Joe Schoen, who wants to bring him back. He felt that, and you could see that. And I looked at Joe Schoen, and like I kind of feel bad for the guy. In a sense, he was thrown to the wolves. In that sense, he's gone. I think he's gone. I think he knows he's gone. In that sense, like, listen, everyone F's up in life. You know what I mean? Like everyone screws up. If you screw up, you're going to get canned. It doesn't feel good. On a personal level, I feel bad for him. He took responsibility, but the comment he made, and you always hear it from GMs, from coaches, like, I know the fans, I know the ownership, I know blah, 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 is upset. Well, I'm even more upset. We don't want to hear that.
Right.
No one wants to hear that.
Make us less upset. What are you going to do with your job to make us less upset? It's true. But okay.
And we're going to keep going on and on and on.
Yeah.
But to have the same answer to every question is infuriating.
Yeah, no doubt. And look, so Bryce is putting his stamp down. He thinks he's out. I'm not positive, but at least I'm leaning towards I'm no longer positive he's safe train.
Hold on. Did you see the chat as the younger Giants fan? Did you see the YouTube live chat?
So
did you see how many comments were rolling in live? I'm on other streams. Like, there are very famous, popular streamers out there. You don't see comments like that. You don't see the constant roll in of comments. It was not a good look.
I had to block it out because, again, I'm using like an audio recording software as I'm doing it. So I saw all of it. But then the moment he really got cooking, like I saw everything on that half an hour wait lead up, I had to exit out. And honestly, I would have got lost in the sauce and lost some of the stuff he said. Okay, let's go to the next point I had to make, which was he was asked specifically about if the Giants have a leadership issue. And I thought that this answer was kind of interesting. So for a couple reasons. Number one, from both comedy and both interest. He had an answer where essentially he talked about Jackson Dart and Cam Scadaboo are young leaders on this team. But also at the same time, your best players don't have to be your leaders. And he went on to mention like the rooms, Devin Singletary in the running back room. He brought up nobody mentions Chris Manhertz. Yeah, because Chris Manhertz, this isn't an anti-Chris Manhertz take, but what are we doing, Joe Schoen? Like I have no
tight end.
Right. Like I have no doubt that I'm sure he's like a good leader for Theo Johnson and Daniel Bell. But like Theo Johnson's not a rookie anymore. He's in year 2. I don't know, man. Like that just was weird. Brian Burns, he mentions a leader, fine. But the truth is the Giants do feel like a team that lacks leadership. He mentioned Andrew Thomas, which was interesting. He didn't mention 3 names, and I think this is important. Russell Wilson, Bobby Okereke, and last but not least is Dexter Lawrence. And why is that important? Those 3 guys got voted captain at the beginning of the year. Captain. Captain. The players vote on captains. If you're going to be prepared as a general manager to answer a question about why it feels like the Giants are lacking leadership, which I don't think anybody from the outside could deny. I mean, they Abdul Carter hasn't gotten his act together. You don't sense the same way it used to be, obviously, in the Coughlin carryover to Mac. Like, we had some of those veterans that were big in the room. He omits 3 guys who wear captain C's, doesn't mention them while mentioning Burns and Thomas, etc. I want to know why those guys were voted captain if you're not viewing them as a leader. Like, those names should roll off your tongue. The captains of your team, when you're asked about leadership, there shouldn't even be I forgot about that guy. If they're true leaders, it should roll off the tongue. Russell Wilson, I'll put to the side. All right, he's not the quarterback, and he made sure to mention Jackson Dart, who is the quarterback. So, okay, let's just say we'll cancel that out. Bobby Okereke, like, I kind of think he's gone at the end of the year anyway. But Dexter Lawrence, man, when you say, and I quote, your best players don't have to be your leaders. Well, Dexter Lawrence is, in theory, your best player, is a captain. Why is he the captain if you're not even mentioning him, and at the same breath, you're mentioning the best players are your leaders? I took that as another subtle sign, without Joe Schoen telling us, that there's something broken and amiss with this regime and Dexter Lawrence.
It's just yet another indictment on the character of Dexter Lawrence this season. And not just this season, last season, the season before. What we saw throughout the first 7 weeks of last season, we've talked about it a bunch on this podcast, number 1 in sacks as a defensive tackle, getting doubled at a rate higher than any other player in the entire league. To go from there, then to get injured, and then practically give up on the team last year, to be in the exact same spot this year, clearly not a leader, clearly not bought into this regime, clearly not bought into from ownership all the way down to the worst defensive player on the team. What we heard on Monday, I think it was yesterday or the night before, I think it was put out yesterday, his comment about Abdul Carter, where it was like, all right, we're going to hold him accountable. That's terrible. We're not going to let that happen. You know what he said? Grow up. Grow up. You're muted.
I'm sorry. I didn't even know I muted. I must have muted to blow my nose. I said,
yeah.
You're
right. That's your message for the rookie who's not showing up to practice on time as the leader of the defense, is the supposed leader on the defense. I think just what we heard from Joe Schoen kind of, reiterates and, hammers that point home of Dexter Lawrence is not the guy that we all thought he was going into this season. And it has little to do with this play on the field. And obviously that impacts it at the end of the day. It has to do with his attitude towards his fellow players and towards the organization as a whole.
Yeah, it's a sad rant and just something to keep an eye on, the future of Dexter Lawrence. Does he want to go through it on the
last thing we'll say, and then we'll move on. The Giants aren't selling low on Dexter Lawrence. Let's just nip that one in the bud.
We'll argue a lot in the offseason. I still think off this year, you're not necessarily selling low on Dexter Lawrence. I think he'll still be highly covered.
You need to wait to hire. If you're going to hire a new general manager, you're going to hire a new head coach, just wait to see what kind of player he's going to be, whether or not he's bought in. There's no.
I want to make sure. I agree with you. I think the Giants themselves are not going to look to shop Dexter Lawrence. I question whether Dexter Lawrence is not going to try to force his way. That's all. That's
maybe if Joe Schoen's back. It seemed like maybe there's some vitriol between the two.
Yeah, there might be.
They purposely left him out. We've seen how Dexter Lawrence has played over the last 3 years.
Or a new GM might come in and go, I don't want an aging D tackle. I do want to move. Yeah, there's a million things.
You're right.
There's a million things that could happen. All right. The next thing I wanted to say, which you could see coming a mile away, and this was the problem. And I don't blame the reporters because this press conference was pushed back late, and it was tight to 20 minutes, and every reporter in there had a set of questions they wanted asked. So I'm setting this up to say, like Pat Leonard, for instance, who I'm going to talk about in a little bit, he would ask something, it would come back around to him like 4 or 5 questions later, and it was almost like his follow-ups. And, everybody kind of had a piece of the pie. So I don't think people were necessarily prepared for certain follow-ups to certain answers. And that when I use the word prepared, it sounds like I'm knocking these guys. I'm not, but it's just kind of funny because these are things I thought of. When asked about, and I think it was Art Stapleton who asked this question, which I thought was an important one. It was a good job by Art. When asked about Jackson Dart and the perceived notion because of like the videos we've seen from the draft day that Brian Dable was the Jackson Dart guy and it wasn't Joe Schoen. There's the famous clip about, hey, you guys are in love with him, blah, blah, blah. You knew this was coming from Joe Schoen. The idea that he was going to take credit for Jackson Dart. Now, he did trade up, and he mentioned a couple things in this answer about, hey, our guys in the room did a good job of kind of knowing where he was valued and trading. He's right about that. I will give him that. Like, they surveyed the board right. But he had a subtle part of this answer. Bryce, I don't know if you picked up on it, where he said it was one of the earliest scheduled 30 visits, top 30 visits I ever booked. And we had the intel, and we saw him at the Senior Bowl, and we had everything, and we had him slotted in for that top 30 visit before Brian Dable was even made aware of him. And I'm paraphrasing whether he said made aware or whatever, and then he tried to defend Dable because Dable was busy coaching the Giants in December and January last year. That was his way of saying, before you credit Brian Dable, remember, we were the one that put him on Brian Dable's radar to begin with. Well, no effing kidding. You put him on Brian Dable's radar to begin with. No effing kidding. You scheduled a top 30 visit. The whole world knew how desperate the Giants were for a quarterback. You were in Colorado nonstop. So if Brian Dable would love Shedeur Sanders and you went with Shedeur Sanders, we knew that you were visiting Colorado a ton. And here's something to keep in mind. This is where no follow-ups happened. The Giants tried to trade up with the Titans to take Cam Ward. They did. Who was that? Was that on Dable? Was that on Shane? I guess we'll never know. The Giants actively tried to pursue a trade for Matt Stafford this offseason. The Giants did inquire about Aaron Rodgers this offseason. The Giants failed on all of those fronts and then signed Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston and could not trade up to number 1, so sat there at number 3 and played the board right and got Jackson Dart. So when he says Joe Schoen, obviously, I mean, look how great this guy, we top 30 visit. Obviously, this feels like a hit. He is trying to show you, as much as all my failures have happened, all that matters is the quarterback. And he's trying to present to the public how much he had to do with bringing in the quarterback while kind of taking away the shine of Dable. It is so beyond obvious. Brian Dable's the one that went to Jackson Dart after 3 games this year when Russell Wilson was giving him nothing. It is so obvious that this was a Dable guy that I thought Shane came across as disingenuous. He told some truths there. But if you really thought that highly of Jackson Dart, if you're Joe Schoen, and you were ahead of the curve with the coach, and the coach meets him and the coach falls in love right away, then there's no reason to be having those Matt Stafford conversations. In fact, there's actually no reason to be taking Abdul Carter number 3 overall, because Brian Dable, if he loved him, probably does that because you don't want to risk. Just like Michael Penix went to the Falcons and nobody saw that coming, the Giants played a weird, we give them the benefit of the doubt. Anybody could have jumped them and surprised them for Jackson Dart, and then what would they have done? If you truly loved him as a general manager, you take him at 3. You don't give a flying what the outside perception is. Now, it worked out, so we'll never criticize it. But Joe Schoen acting like they knew from the very beginning and they loved it, and they were the ones that brought it to Dable. Well, how much did you really love him if you tried to do 50 other things at quarterback and passed them at a 3 first? Like that, I hated that answer, but it was very predictable, Bryce.
It's almost like he was getting, and it's not even almost like, this is exactly what happened. It's like he was standing trial in the court of public opinion, fighting for his job, fighting for his career, essentially, and essentially pulling shit out of his ass. All this stuff, I'm not going to say it was all contrived, but it's almost like he's defending himself, like he's covering his ass. And to be honest, considering the fact that he had his own job and his own career in the back of his mind, it's almost hard to take anything he said as not disingenuous. It felt like every single thing was being said, calculated, all this kind of stuff in order to save his ass. So if that's his mindset coming out here, talking to the media, who has not spoken to him since before the season, it's been, 4 months? They asked him 25 minutes worth of questions. He was up there to save his ass. And it's unfortunate that we can't sit here and break down, because he gave us nothing and he's never given us anything. All he said was to every single answer and every single question is, I understand. But you have to, when you're trying to come up with a conclusion and you're trying to come to a conclusion about what happened in that press conference, you have to take it with a grain of salt, considering the fact that he had his own ambitions and he was looking out for himself. So I think, all that you just said, like, I think just the conclusion for that is, he's just looking out for himself.
Of course. And I'm done with the passes. I'm reading right through it. Okay. Let's wrap with the last 2 points here for me. Joe Schoen I thought his most insightful answer was one of the many questions that Pat Leonard asked, which was, Pat really pressed him on the idea of like, what makes you right for this job, right? We heard the same. I know Connor Hughes had asked the same kind of question. He was asked it basically 50 different ways during this press conference. It felt like every reporter had their, like, I got to get my answer out of this there, which left some meat off the bone on other things that could have been asked. But again, I don't blame these guys, right? They have a job to do. In that answer, what I thought was the money answer towards the end, he really has some reflection. I thought said some good things in terms of, look, I obviously I'm not going to bat 1,000. I already can't. He admitted the mistakes. You have to. But within there, he really kept hammering home, my job now is to learn from my mistakes, not make the same mistake twice. And my follow-up to that would have been too late. Forget Jalen Hyatt and Evan Neal and Josh Azudu and some of these guys that are occupying roster spots that shouldn't be. Forget that for a second. The $1 million question that needed to be asked to Joe Schoen, and that would have been a perfect time to follow up, that was not asked, which was, Joe, such a simple thing would have been fixing the kicker position. How this year did you, with Graham Gano, get caught again with him being hurt for the third straight year? There was an injury issue that screwed you in a game where wins and losses happen. His cap hit, when you released him, you would have saved $3 million instead of restructuring certain deals to simply get rid of Graham Gano. Why did you make that same mistake for a third straight year? That's a great follow-up. He just got done telling you that he can't make the same mistake twice. He's made the same mistake with Graham Gano 3 straight years. And when you think about everything with Dart and Abdul Carter and Brian Dable, I understand there's like a lot of flashing stuff in headlights and you're screwing up Evan Neal and screwing up a couple of those drafts and, maybe rebounding with some of these. And why is the 2024 class regress? Like, I understand all of these things that Giant fans would have questions to. But can't we all agree that his handling of Graham Gano in the kicker position, when you start ranking when the Joe Schoen era is done, the most egregious,
100%.
it might be number one.
Agreed.
It might be number one.
It cost 3 games over the last 2 years.
Yeah. And that question was not asked, despite the fact that he said he's got to learn not to make the same mistake twice. He's made the same mistake 3 times with Graham Gano.
I think the reporters were caught up in the moment. There's just been so much garbage over the last 7 losses in a row for the Giants here that it's almost gotten lost in the shuffle. I don't, I'm not here to, shit all over the, the reporters, but
I'm not either.
I know, but I can understand why it wasn't brought up. I'm sure they're kicking themselves over it. They're like, damn, like we let that one go. Like,
you know what I mean? Like four or five of you guys asked the same question. Why are you the right person for the job? Like,
you got to grill them on why not.
Right. There's got to be other ways, because you asked that. It opens it up to another avenue of, well, isn't that further proof you're not okay for the job? You know what I mean?
He's like, I understand the question, but we're gonna get better. We'll solve the kicking. But dude, you've had 55 chances. Solve the kicking issue.
The Jet game in 23, whatever game that was last year, I've already forgotten. The Commanders and the Chief game this year. 3 straight years, 3 different games. Okay. That leaves me with that last question I had talked about that really pressed them on. I have to be fair. If I'm ever going to criticize somebody and they go out and they have a good day, good everything, I think it's disingenuous to not give them their flowers. I thought Pat Leonard was the MVP of the press conference. This is my final point of this. And look, I know Pat Leonard has a very hot and cold relationship with Giant fans. Pat Leonard, I know the man. I actually think he's a good person. And I think he's a good reporter. I do. I think he does a good job way back when. I mean, I used to read Pat's stuff when he covered the Rangers. The problem with Pat, and look, Pat will be defensive if you tell him this, but I think we all understand. The problem with Pat is he leans negative from the jump. And Pat, in an era of Giants football that's been really bad, is going to end up looking more right than wrong because he's a lot ahead of the curve. But make no mistake, I mean, Pat was basically looking to fire Dable like 2 games into 2023 after they lost to the Cowboys. Now, it's very easy in this business, in the sports business, if you lean negative, more times than not, you're eventually going to be proven right than if you lean positive, because it's very hard to win championships. Usually things end with a thud with all teams. I don't always appreciate that from Pat. And in fact, I think it gets a little tiresome when fans get beaten over the head with some of the rhetoric and all of that. However, on a day like this is why you have a Pat Leonard as a reporter.
Yep.
For all the nonsense and the agitation that it feels like sometimes Pat is just like going above and beyond where it's not necessary at times. A day like this, a Pat Leonard who's already primed and has thick enough skin to do that to begin with when it's not necessary, you need him when it is necessary. And a Joe Schoen press conference when the coach has already been fired, I mean, that's a Pat Leonard Super Bowl. And I thought Pat Leonard would not allow Joe Schoen to escape the grasp. I mean, you talk about the Giants with the pressure rate and not getting sacks this year. Pat Leonard had about 6 sacks today on Joe Schoen. He had the right follow-ups for it. And I thought Pat Leonard in many ways was, for a guy that the Giant fan base could do without it many times, I thought he was the hero many of us needed on a Monday cold afternoon in New York asking Joe Schoen these questions.
I echo your sentiments entirely. And I think it's funny, how things switch up in this industry. Like on one side, you're with the people, and then you might be right or wrong, and then you're against the people, and everyone hates you. You might be right or wrong there. Feels like you never could be right. In this situation, this was perfect storm for him. Finally, everything was working against the Giants. This is where he thrives. He had an opportunity, knocked it out of the park. That's all I got to say. Congratulations. Yeah. Like that. Hey,
you look like Cam Payne in game 1 versus the Pistons last year, Bryce.
Okay. And like, is that
red hot? You didn't see it coming. He was red hot. Come on, you Nick fan, you don't remember the game? Bad job by you.
Wait, what? Wait. I thought wait, what game?
Game 1 versus the Pistons last year.
Oh yeah, with campaign.
Yeah.
I thought you were giving. I heard Pacers. I thought you were giving me shit about them losing that game.
No,
I just automatically assume that you're like there's some cynicism in everything you say about the Knicks.
I was making a funny
loser Nets fan amongst like the 9 Nets fans in the world.
You guys got to.
I understand.
You guys got to shake that shtick. There's a lot more Net fans than you realize.
See the crowd, the differentiation at Barclays Center. I heard it was like 80-20 Knicks Nets.
Dude,
go back to New Jersey.
For the first time at a Knick Net game, it wasn't overwhelmingly Knicks last week. I was shocked.
You were there, right?
Yeah, it was like for the first time, it was like 60-40 Nets. For the first time, they had more fans. It was crazy. I didn't see it coming.
How about Danny Wolf?
Danny Wolf? How? He's got soft hands. About time he got out of the G League. All right. Do you have anything else you want to clean up here at the end?
I don't. I mean, again, like we talked about this before. Everything you said is exactly what I wanted to say. Like the Chris Manhertz comment, I was dying. I was dying too. I mean, like, come on, dude. Like, what are we doing? He shows up 35 minutes late, and then he brings up Chris Manhertz in a press conference where he only spoke for 25 minutes. Whatever.
All right. So here's the deal. So anybody who needs a giant mental health break, now's the time to take it. It's the bye week. They regroup. 4 games left that, oddly enough, feel like some of them might be winnable. We'll see. We'll do those preview pods when they get there. The Giants, we don't know how much of this, because remember, Hard Knocks is going to be the NFC East, and I watched the AFC North last year where the Browns were very much out of it. Every episode up until the playoffs had something Browns related, but it wasn't the bulk of the episodes. Like, you still got like heavy Browns, heavy Ravens, heavy Steelers. I'm assuming you're going to get heavy Cowboys, America's team. I'm assuming you're going to get heavy Eagles. We'll see how much Giants Commanders, but there's going to be little Giant stuff that happens here in Hard Knocks. If anything really fun and interesting happens on this week's episode, Bryce and I will be back to pop off. But there's a chance maybe you don't hear from me and Bryce until 2 episodes in of Hard Knocks early next week, maybe, and then we'll come back then for a preview pod. But bye week time's always weird. We pumped out 2 podcasts in one day for you today. This is, again, just download and subscribe, One Giant Step.
And I know we don't always post episodes on the WFAN YouTube. So if you're looking for our podcast, we post every single one wherever you get your podcast. I guess those are exclusives. Those are special episodes.
Episodes.
You don't want to, if you want to listen, but you're okay with not watching us for once, please like and subscribe.
And look, if you're on iTunes, drop us a review, a little 5 stars, whatever.
Please
hook us up.
Everything helps.
Everything helps. All right, Bryce and I will be back. Again, if something else breaks in Giant Land, we'll be back. And that's why you download and subscribe. If not, I'm targeting early next week to just kind of get a refreshed. We've seen some Hard Knocks content. Let's kind of set the scene, and then we'll follow up with a Commanders preview episode. All right. So he's Bryce Gelman, at Bryce Gelman, Twitter, X. Check him out. He does a lot of live stuff with the Knicks as well. If you're trying to get your basketball fix as football season winds down, jump in, check him out. You got all the Knicks coverage there. At Shaun Morash, Twitter and X. No, I will not be answering any WFAN related questions. No comment.
Hey, I will. You follow me, I'll give you a DM. I'll tell you what I think. A little incentive. You want to give me a follow on?
Careful, Bryce.
Careful,
Careful, Bryce.
everything that Shaun is thinking about the situation.
Careful, Bryce. Download and subscribe everywhere podcasts are available. Thanks for taking one giant step with us.